All right, awesome. So thanks for coming, guys. Hopefully we won't need many more chairs than this. But this is Hass of Strip Panel Naked, great YouTube channel, one of my favorites, as well as panel by panel editor in chief, I suppose, creator.
Yeah, just guy.
Yeah, of panel by another. It's a digital comics magazine, super cool. I picked up a couple issues last week and really dug it. So. Yeah, and super knowledgeable about some of this stuff. I mean, I've been watching your channel for a long time. I think the first video I saw was the Headlopper one.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really admired the way you piece things together and work through it. So thanks so much for joining us.
No, yeah, it's cool. I've been excited about it all day, man. It's just a fun experience. I think. I hope anyway. Hopefully it is for you guys as well.
Yeah, well, you know, it's always fun to do this. We've had a few creators in the past, but never really done like a workshop type of thing. So if you have something ready for us, we're like...
Yeah, well, what I was thinking was, I mean, because like the thing, what I guess is my sort of shtick or whatever is trying to just look at comics and like look a little bit at like how they work. And not necessarily so much in like the... overly theoretical, because then that gives just way too much license for people to tell you that you're wrong. But not in like the full-on Scott McCloud way, but like maybe like a step back from Scott, because I'm nowhere near the level of genius that Scott McCloud is. But somewhere that just kind of takes a look at like what comics are doing, and then tries to, I kind of, you know, my thing is just to try and kind of like unpick a little bit like how it's doing the thing it's doing. Because that's the thing that I always get really excited about in comics and storytelling generally is like, okay, so this thing's told me like a really cool story. Okay, so how has it done that? Like, what can I learn from that? What can I take from that? What's it kind of doing? So yeah, that's basically with everything that I like. That anything that anyone may know me from is some version of that in some form. And so one of the things you asked me to do was, to, you know, obviously come and talk to you guys a little bit about how to do that, or like what that looks like, or how to sort of go about doing that. And so I think, as I said to you in email, like the best way I can think of is just to take a look at some stuff and just like talk through it. I think that's probably the easiest thing to do. So the one, like if we have a look at this book, so Black Silent, the very first volume of it, very first page. This was like, I think I've talked, I have a vague recollection of having talked about this before, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it on like a episode of Strip Panel Naked, so maybe I don't know, imagined it or dreamt it or something. But the first page for me of this is like, I think first, like I always love looking at first issues and first pages, because that's where the people making the book have got, they're trying to tell you what they're doing, and they're trying to give you a sense of the world that they're trying to create, and a bit of the magic they're trying to make as well. And the first page for me for this was really interesting. But I also like would love to know in terms of like you all, because I presume, have you guys read it?
Yeah, at this point, most of us are to have read it. We've got some new faces, which is awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, I think this is probably my third time reading it, and then within the past couple weeks, everybody should have read it, is the hope.
Okay. So the first page, if you have a look at the first page, like I don't want to be too like descriptive of how I feel it works, but more so talk like maybe ask some of you guys like if there's anything that you notice that is interesting about it. Like for me in the first panel, there's something that stood out immediately. Like, is there anything? I don't know how best to do this, but is there anything that like stood out from that stands out in that first image for any of you? What like reading this now?
It's definitely sort of catastrophic. And it's talking about his own failure of self and things like that. So I suppose the imagery goes with the lettering a bit there in that sense.
So yeah, there's one thing that like this is a very modern comic book thing, is that really heavy, like intense, heavy narration. That if you like, if you have your reality cap on, it doesn't necessarily make sense within the context of the scene, because no one in pure panic is like this eloquent. Like this dude is really eloquent. So there is, but what you get is this kind of level of artifice that I think is always interesting when you have like a strong narration, especially like a strong character narration. That for me personally, I sometimes struggle a little bit when there's like a strong voice that doesn't necessarily like gel perfectly well. Like, because if this was me, I might like my captions would just be like me screaming. But it's so that there's always a level of like artifice and a tiny level of distance. But I also like wonder, and this is getting really theoretical. I also wonder how much of that you get anyway from a comic book, like how much you are aware as a person sat down like flicking through some pieces of paper, like there is a distance naturally between you and the thing anyway. That was I will go on so many tangents, so I'll apologize. I'm going to apologize for that in advance. But the thing that stood out for me immediately was the color, because what you've got is like a lot of green and blues that are kind of like these soft. Because green and blue together, they sit quite close to each other in the color wheel. And in between them is turquoise, so they kind of essentially blend into each other. So all the way around the edges of the panel is a lot of blue, a lot of green. And they are colors that sit very nicely together. They don't necessarily make each other jar. They blend. Whereas in the dead in the center is like these two beams of red. And red, to me in that first panel, that red is very, very like, it pops quite dramatically against everything else. And if I wanted to, to put on my strip panel naked hat, would be to say that like these two red dots essentially like make them look different than everything else around them. Because if you've got everything else essentially is like blue and green, and then you have these two things that are very, very different. They immediately look like they shouldn't be there. And so I think from like the very first panel, I mean, it's the second page technically, but the first what I would, sequential page, I think you can tell from that first image that they shouldn't be there. I mean, you tell. I don't know how you guys also read this, but to me, I could tell immediately without really knowing the first time I read this what the book was about. Like I could tell that they were not supposed to be in that place.
Yeah, you're definitely color cues there in terms of like it's a very natural world. Red, a little more alien in this setting, so I can totally see that.
And so, okay, so if I pose you the question then on like the fourth panel, which is the monsters, because they are also they are also like a similar color to their helmets, that they are like red. Like a deep red. So like, I don't know, again, for you, because I have my way of reading a bit. For you, like, do those monsters seem like, again, do you feel like that fits in with the tone of the world, or does it feel separate?
I think the realm they're in fits right, but it's not normal to the main characters, of course.
That's what, yeah. So that's what I also read it as, which is also a weird thing, because if we say that like the red becomes alien, then you switch point of view, and that's also a weird, interesting thing with comics, is where does the point of view lie? Like I think with like novels, you can have like a really strong authorial voice, because what you can write a whole novel as though it's the inner monologue of the person, of a main character or whatever in your prose. With comics, it's weird because you do have like the narration, but you also got what would be like a cameraman almost, like there is someone else kind of capturing this information.
Yeah.
And so it's weird to think about where is that point of view? So is the point of view like the narration in that we are seeing this as Grant sees it in the world, or is this just someone almost capturing it like like a documentary film crew or whatever is following them? And so there is like, I think as a creator you have a choice, and I like to think of everything as though there is a conscious decision. I'm not saying that like everything that I say here is 100% the thought process that went through like Remender and Scalera's like point of view or brain when they were making this, but I like to come at it with the assumption that there is a decision being made for most of these processes. And so for me, that's like that. I don't know where the point of view sits, and I think maybe it starts to fluctuate a little bit, because the point of view for the first panel to me is not necessarily their point of view. It feels like we are watching it from a distance, whereas by the time you get to panel 4, it sort of feels much more like their point of view. And panel 5 starts to feel a lot more like their point of view, because they're kind of like right up in the forefront, and we can feel that kind of like fear and danger, and you can see like the sweat dripping down his face and everything like that. So the point of view starts to shift weirdly, which is a thing that I think comics can do like super duper well, because you don't actually have a dude with a camera in these scenes. You just have someone draw it. And so you can switch point of view, you can switch camera angles, you can switch location almost, dramatically, which this series also does. Completely switch from one place to another, with almost panel, from one panel straight to the next. And you just go with it because it relates back to that earlier point about artifice. I think there is a level of artifice across the whole thing, which allows you to get away with a lot more, I think, than you could in film or even any other medium, really. Because as I say, we're aware of the relationship between ourselves as readers and the work as a hand-drawn piece of fakeness almost. And please say something if this just sounds like nonsense to everyone. But there is a weird relationship, I think, between us and the comic that allows creators to get away with it. And I also wonder if that's why we see so many really, really good science fiction comic books that Image have put out a ton of really, really solid sci-fi books that have been, to my mind, incredibly interesting sci-fi that I don't think we've seen as interesting in films as of late.
I worked on that this morning as we were going through our weekly order and putting it in the system. And we were talking about Images creating all these cool sci-fi stories. And I was like, sci-fi is taking over zombies, man.
I think there's something about comics that allows it's like a much more natural relationship, I think, with fantasy. I think it's weird that fantasy, we were talking quickly about Headlopper just before, and McLean had done this and stuff, but McLean's is doing this kind of strong fantasy voice. But apart from that, there is Seven to Eternity. There's a small, there's not a ton. Does Seven to Eternity even count as fantasy, or is that maybe?
I'd say no.
But I know there was Autumn Lands. There wasn't a ton of fantasy books, and I would put fantasy and sci-fi, and please don't hate me for this, but I'd put them as two fairly similar genres in terms of what they, in terms of the relationship with the reader. But yeah, there's sci-fi and comic books have gone together well. I maybe part of it is just that natural relationship they had, back from the early days, even stuff like Fantastic Four being, heavily that sci-fi, science fiction, or science fantasy, whatever you want to call it. But there is something about the predisposition or the pre-level of fakeness that you accept when you pick up a comic book that I think maybe allows you to seep into a new world a little bit easier. I don't know. Again, that was a weird tangent. So the other thing I was going to say really quickly about this intro, which I love, is your whole your kind of budget or your money or whatever that you've got in a comic book comes from pages. So your average book is 22, 24, 20 pages, around 20 to 24 pages.
Sure.
And that's kind of your, if you have a budget in comics, that's kind of it. And so I always love when people take the time, and they do this a ton, at least once an issue, if not maybe twice an issue. They have these big, these big double splash, not splash, but these big double pages that tell story.
Yeah.
And most of the time they do it to tell scale, and that's what I love. I think that's the best use of it. There's you've got people like Brian Michael Bendis who will use 2 pages to tell a bunch of story and a bunch of talking heads and stuff like that, which is fine. But for my money, the best use of it is always scale, and they do that so well, because when you get to that big title page, a couple of pages later with the, and they're on the back of a giant tortoise turtle thingy, and that's just pure, you've gone from, and this is what I mean about going from, one crazy extreme to another in comics, is you go from giant monsters the page before to just, full body shots to then the edge of a cliff, and then you turn the page and you've got this massive 2-page wide spread, and they are dots with little exclamation dots, just so you can actually see where they are on the back of this giant turtle thing. And I think scale to me is so interesting in comics. I really, really love the way they do that, and they do it such a ton. But also again, I had one final last point that I was going to try and get you guys to talk a little bit about, which was about location. So if I ask you, having read, these, they go to 4 different locations, 5 different locations over these 6 issues.
Yeah.
Do you, as readers, did you get a sense of the? Did you get a sense of location in each of those places? Could you kind of like tell me what each of those worlds felt like or looked like?
Without a doubt, yeah. I think I could name them off the top of my head. When the second location, that sort of World War One, flip side Manifest Destiny sort of location. They spent a lot of time there, but it has such character that it sticks with you for a while. I think some of the other ones are a little less impactful.
Right.
I guess that's sort of in the pace of the story. You know.
Really, I kind
So-
of, most of the kind of like safe haven they ended up in gave me that Mos Eisley kind of feel from
right. I
like
think that's
Star
fair.
Wars. I mean, it was like
Yeah, especially with the
Trader
chase
world.
through it, yeah.
So that's like I think. So this was I think what it does super clever. Isn't it does not give you, it gives you like a sense of a location, but it doesn't give you a ton of detail about that location. Like, so you picked out the the second location is like the World War One, but with like, sci-fi and a bit of, alienness to it. And that's clever because what it does is it gives you a place. I'm trying to find where we're at. Where that page? Oh yeah, here it is. So it gives you like something that you can grasp onto immediately. And I think that's also super interesting that you both referred to other properties, essentially. Not that World War One was a property, but other like things that you can hang. Yeah, like other things that you can hang a location on. Because what I don't think they do, and I don't think they want to, is spend a ton of time trying to establish each of these different universes or worlds or whatever as a whole separate place. They just kind of go, it's like World War One but with aliens. And they do that really, really cleverly. So I want to get to that first page where they first land there, which is just at the end of the first issue.
Yeah, we could,
So it's like a big double. It's like the double page one. Everyone know where I'm at?
yeah, with the ship overhead and sort of zooming into our point of view there.
Yeah. So on that page, so this is the thing on that page is like there isn't a ton of information, right? There isn't a ton of stuff for you to. Is everyone sorry? Everyone, I'll wait for everyone to catch up.
I think we got it.
Yeah.
So yeah, on that page, right? There isn't like, I mean, what can you see? Like there's a big alien ship. There's they're kind of like their bunker thing they're hiding in, and then there's some sort of soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. There's nothing. There's nothing else. There's no buildings. There's no. There's nothing else to kind of tell you what else is going on. And if you flick, we've got to kind of go a bunch more pages to get there. But if you get to like the page where they're talking about 4 hours and the pillar being sabotaged and stuff, I think that's a really good summation of like what they do, which is there is no location in these panels. It's just it's just color.
Yeah.
It's just orange. If you flick a page later, it's like the most you get given is, on that third panel where he says just under where he says, "You tell me," there's like a scratch of grass in ink.
Right.
Below that, there's a bunker. There isn't really anything for me to tell you much more about this world beyond World War One, but with aliens. And what I guess they say to you is, you don't need to know much more than that. But I also think it's interesting for a sci-fi book that's all about going to different universes. Like you don't really, there isn't much else to it. If you flick through like the pages kind of after that, it's just painted backgrounds. It's just colored backgrounds, mostly orange, a little bit of blue,
gradient.
But that's the thing. Like beyond that, like what could you say about that world apart from the fact it's World War One but with aliens?
Do you prefer this technique of just visually showing it instead of some Star Trek exposition about how, it's silicon-based life forms and stuff on this planet? Like, is that something you prefer to see?
Well, what I think it speaks to is I think it speaks to what they want it to do, and I think the fact that they don't tell you anything else about the world says to me that they're not interested in that. As in the storytellers, so Remender and Scalera, like I don't think they care, but I think that's fine. I don't think they have to care. But because because the story isn't about the individual worlds that they visit so much more as it is about the danger that they end up in each of these worlds, and the fact that there's kind of some betrayal and stuff like that. Which is why also for what is supposed to be on the face of it, presents itself as this kind of universe trotting space adventure, is also mostly just people talking to each other.
Oh yeah,
like
it's a lot of close-ups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think that's bad, but I also think it's a trick because, and I don't mean that like in a bad way. I mean that in a really clever storytelling way. The book spends the whole 6 issues mostly, apart from that really cool sequence at the end with the monkeys and the gas things.
Oh yeah.
It spends 6 issues lying to you about what it's doing, but it does it so convincingly that you never ask what the truth is. It's like, I want to believe the lie. The lie isn't easy to take, so I take the lie. But that's what I mean about like kind of like scraping back the surface of the stuff and seeing how it works. Is this book tells you almost nothing about what it pretends to be about. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's funny because the guy that funds the whole project says that about Grant pretty much. He says that about Grant McKay. He's like, people, want to believe the lie or something along those lines later in the book.
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
If that was intentional.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this sort of thing because, I asked you, like, could you, did each of these worlds feel like you could kind of like get a real grasp of them? And, the sense I got was like, yes, like you understand these worlds, but yet when we look at it, there isn't really anything to understand. And that is part of the genius, is by not giving you even a glimpse of anything else really in these places, there's nothing for you to question. So you don't need to learn anything new beyond that really basic pitch of World War I, but with aliens, because there's nothing for you to question beyond that. So as far as we are aware, that entire world is like that bunker, that one little bit of a kind of like war field and aliens. And it's and part of that is the plot base, because they don't want to go too far away from the I forgot what they call it, the pendulum.
The pillar.
Pillar, yeah. Pendulum. They don't want to go too far from the pillar. So part of that is by design, and it's cleverly, the whole thing is like this really cleverly constructed ruse to not get you to ask many questions. And like this is, which is also kind of why I always feel bad like trying to like decipher this stuff, because now it makes it sound like, I don't know if this sounds less interesting to you or more interesting when you come to look at it like this. But it's it's a really clever set of building blocks that essentially is just a series of lies that the book tells you to get you to go along with it. But also that's just storytelling. I mean, that's all storytelling is a series of lies that you walk away with, kind of satisfied.
I think it works. If I'm going to try and sell this trade to a prospective customer or something, I'm going to pitch it pretty much as, a guy traveling through dimensions trying to get his kids home, and with amazing art and crazy, huge action pieces. But really, it is a lot deeper than that, I think, and that's what keeps you there, I think. So.
Yeah. I think because it's just a character piece. It's a character piece with a really, really clever like backdrop of science fiction, and I think this is the thing that I don't think comics can do as strongly as film is character pieces. I think you can struggle with character pieces in comics because so much of what make character pieces work in film is that kind of identification of like reality. And I know I keep coming back to like the same like 3 points, right? But I think they all build together. But in film there is a reality. Like I can show you a shot of a man's face, and you can just get a sense of reality of that. Like if you look at me now, you're all going to assume that I'm like sat in a house somewhere in real life and I exist, which is my clever trick on all of you. But that's all it takes, right? I can see you sat there now, and I'm like, there is a reality to you, even though you're digital and you're on there's a camera and there's no depth to you per se. Like I can see you there and go like, that's real people, because I know what real people look like. Now, if you were to draw you guys sat there and hand it over to me, I would know it's a drawing of people. And so I'm immediately less invested in the humanity of you all, because you are then removed from reality, like a stage removed from reality. And character pieces are so difficult for me, and you know, this is going to be very subjective, but for me, they're always really difficult because I already know that you aren't real, so it's harder for me to care about you like almost immediately.
Sure.
So when you frame it on the backdrop of something that is super exciting, not that character pieces aren't exciting, but you frame it on the backdrop of people like jumping through space and time and dimensions, I'm going to care a little bit more about it already because it's cool. Like it sounds like really, I don't know, I mean, it makes it sound really cheap or whatever, but it's true because it's the same with The Walking Dead. Like The Walking Dead is 180 issues in or whatever it is.
Somewhere along there, yeah.
Yeah, and all that is people. I mean, it's you know, it's month after month of people just talking to each other. But what they've done is they just put zombies in the background, and all of a sudden the texture of it comes alive a little bit more because now we've got this excitement that is like bumbling under the background. And it's not just about people talking; it's about people talking who may die at any time because a zombie might come and rip their throat out. Right. And it's the same with this. It's people talking, and really it's just relationship drama, right? It's just Grant has cheated on his wife, and he thinks he's like the genius guy who wants to take the credit or whatever. That's really all it is. It's a guy who's cheated on his wife and he's trying to hide it. That's six issues of that.
Pretty much, yeah.
but it doesn't come across like that because every issue they're like beaming away somewhere else completely new and they're getting into trouble and someone dies. And that's the lie again at the heart of all of it is someone dies so that we care about this one guy's relationship drama and the relationship with his kids. And I love that so much. And I love that like the first time I read it and I enjoyed it, I was like, this is a really cool sci-fi book. And then the second time I read it, I was like, oh, it's not. It's just a book about adultery under the backdrop of really cool colors.
Yeah. And I guess you're sort of worried at the idea of like the wife might find this out, or what's going to happen when Grant's adultery is discovered or uncovered or whatever. But none of these people might make it out of this alive at the same time. So it's
or
like,
even get back to the
or get back to home. So
yeah,
you almost
it's the no, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say you almost end up. I don't know if it's fair to say caring more about the idea that like his family's falling apart than him dying. But I think that is the truth of it to some degree.
Yeah, and the other weird thing with comics, and that ties into part of this as well, is it comes out every month. It's like it comes out in 20, 22 pages or whatever every single month. So I don't like. Did any of you have any of you been reading this like monthly, or did you all buy the trade?
I've only read the trades, yeah.
Because I think that also changes it a little bit differently because your experience of it month by month is obviously like, when you reach the end of a chapter here, you just keep reading. And then, like I read all 6 issues in one sitting just to pre-prepare for this one. And when I read it the first time, I read it in trade as well, all the way through. But if I was reading it monthly, it's much harder to hang a monthly comic on, is this guy's wife going to find out he cheated? Like it's which is also why I think you don't get many slice of life comics, maybe like Royal City or Giant Days, maybe. There's like 2 that come out for the direct market every single month because it's really difficult to get people to care about just human drama. But by adding that thing that you were saying, that caveat of like, okay, he's trying to stop his wife from finding out, but he also may die. Then you're like, okay, cool, right. So and then he doesn't die, but someone else died. You're like, oh my god, how are they going to deal with this death? And it's really just, again, it's just a series of lies to get you around the story that Remender really wants to tell you, which is about this family, this family relationship, this family drama, which is a lot of his work is about that central concept of like family, and also dysfunctional families kind of pops up a lot. Also a little bit in Death or Glory as well, which I've only read the first issue, but it was very strong in that first issue as well.
Yeah.
And that was Death or Glory is the same thing. It was dysfunctional sort of family relationships, but built around like car chases and cool cars. So it's the same thing. It's like you mask this. It's almost like masking the story you really want to tell in the stuff that people will get excited about month by month. Which I always hate doing this because I always feel like I'm just like destroying like
Sci-fi
the
at
thing.
all.
Yeah. It's like it's not what you thought it was. The reason you like it isn't the reason you really like it. I don't know. Yeah,
I get it.
there's all these kind of cool building blocks that I'm super fascinated by. I mean, like, okay, so for each of you, what was the thing that made you keep reading it? Obviously, apart from having to come to this today, but like, what was the thing that made you want to get through 6 issues and what made you keep turning the page?
Tension.
Tension, definitely.
Tension.
Yeah, and I mean, I would sort of fail it to say Matteo Scalera's art is just incredible. I'm always looking for the next sort of vista that he's going to create. So I think those are 2 main drivers for me, for sure. You know, it seems like every page somebody could die, or they could jump to another world that's even worse than the one they were just in. So yeah, tension and I suppose vistas to some degree.
Well, was there a visual from these issues that stick out in your mind? Is there anything that is kind of like, is there a page or an image that has stuck with you? Because I also think like that's a real big part of this book's appeal, beyond the writing or whatever. The thing that, like, it's really similar to you, the thing that made me really excited is seeing Scalera's art along with Dean White, who painted it. Those 2 together is just phenomenal, and so just wanting to see what they will do next. And I think part of that is just also, Remender just giving them visuals to draw in the first place. The thing that was sticking out to me the whole time was just those giant, the giant turtles. Like, that was the one thing that just stuck in my brain the entire time. And just thinking like, well, where can they, what can they do to top this sort of thing? And part of monthly comics, I also think, and it's, again, I always feel, it just feels a little bit like I'm kind of saying like, there is just certain tricks you do to make people buy your book every month. But I mean, there is an element of that. But also just having these kind of cool visuals that get you talking about it, because the turtle thing for me, I showed that to my girlfriend as well straight away. I was like, look at these cool turtles, man. Look how big they are, and there's like wheels on their backs, and it was like, and part of that is like us as readers also like filling in the blanks a little bit. Like, they leave so much of that stuff open that we end up filling in the blanks, or as much as we kind of like want to. So yeah, like the visuals, I think that is a really like good point, is the like how gorgeous the book is as a whole, because it is a beautiful
Not all
beautiful
comics
book.
have that going for it, but this one definitely.
I mean, you'd hope at a bare minimum that they would have good art, but yeah, I mean, there's some are particularly special. I think the art in this is particularly special.
Yeah.
But I do think a big part of that is like the fact it has been like digitally painted, because it makes it look different immediately from the kind of like that kind of like modern superhero look, or that modern kind of coloring that you'd get. It made me think of like Richard Eisenlove when he painted like 1608. Do you remember the Marvel series 1608?
Oh yeah.
1408, 1608.
Yeah, 1608.
1608.
1608.
Yeah, and it like the thing just feels special immediately, because comics don't look like this. Like like a regular monthly comic doesn't look like this. So the whole thing just feels really special. And that is just the biggest cheat in comics, is if you can get a beautiful artist to do beautiful pages for you every single month, that's it. You've sold, like, at least you've sold me on a book immediately.
1602. That was what it was.
1602. Yeah. Okay, we were close. We were in the same century.
Same decade, even. Pretty close.
Yeah, same decade. Yeah.
I think
so. Okay, so I mean, sorry, go on.
I was just going to give an example of one that stuck with me while I was rereading this today. I think it was my 3rd time through, but was the start to issue 6 with the monkey. It's like the first time we see the beings, I think, in the second time in the last sort of setting, and you've got Grant and Kadar, thank you, falling, and the reflection of them in the monkey's eye, and you definitely know. There's something more to the monkey than it's sort of you might have been led to believe previously. Like, there's something in his eye that's greater than just a monkey's eye, I guess.
That's such a cool page, because it's like the whole page, right?
Yeah,
and look, that's such a cool page. And then they follow up with one of their big like title card double page spreads. But that's I think there is something in building your chapters around certain key visuals. And I think opening strong. I mean, that's a very Brian K. Vaughan thing to do. Brian K. Vaughan will often start with like one really, really strong image. And then he'll also do the exact same thing on the end. Like if you read like an issue of Saga, it's I don't want to say formulaic, but there is a structure he works towards. And part of that is like hitting you with a big image to begin with, because all of a sudden you're excited. And that's exactly what the start of chapter 6 of this does. Like it hits you with a big image that goes like, this is cool, pay attention. This is different and unique, like a close up of the monkey's face with these dudes falling in the reflection. And then what Brian K. Vaughan will do will also kind of just hit you with a big splash ending, which is also what the end of issue 5 does, where it hits you with the big, it cheats a little bit because it's 2 panels, whereas mostly BKV will do 1. But it gives you that one big image that just says, okay, like, come back next time.
Right.
And it's kind of like a weird underpinning to each individual issue where they will all do that. Like they all start with this big moment. In the first issue, as we talked about earlier, it's like 2 people that you don't know running, and then some big monsters that hit. And then here you've got the monkey's eye. Each issue is structured to a certain degree to get you to care about it the moment you start reading it, and then to get you to care about buying the next issue as soon as you finish it. And again, it's like a I don't want to say cheapness, because this is just how you have to kind of like write these comics, but there is a lie to the structure, that this is not a natural course of events, but this is a structured course of events.
Right.
Have I ruined this? Have I completely ruined like reading this yet?
No. We're gonna talk about this for the next hour or so, like with us, and hopefully, I think this has given me a lot of ideas of how to hold a comic club, and specifically to talk about in this book. So I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, that's my fear always is, when it's kind of like analyzing something to death to the point where people are like, I just really wanted to read this cool sci-fi book, man, and then you kind of told me it wasn't that at all. So hopefully I haven't killed it. Well, I mean, like, the only other thing I want to talk about a little bit, which I also really, really, really like, is the lettering. And like, people maybe don't talk about lettering enough. And I feel bad if I come here and don't talk to you about lettering as a person that does letter comic books, because I'm going to be one of the only people that's going to care about it. But the lettering on this, I love. I don't know if this is a thing that anyone notices. Was the lettering anything that you particularly saw or noticed at all? I mean, you don't have to say yes, just because I'm asking you the question.
Looking at it, it does look like a subtype of Comic Sans than normal. Kind of more edges than smooth curves that like really brings out kind of the more serious notes of the story. Because I noticed like with even like Preacher, it was still kind of had that more smooth edge to it in the lettering compared to this. Yeah,
absolutely. There is like a kind of harshness, I think, to it that matches the visuals, especially when you first open up, and because the world on the very, very first page is super harsh. The world is what trips them up. The world is what seems to be slowing them down a little bit. The world is what seems to be trapping them there. And the letter forms also have that kind of like weird. They give you the sense of like it feels like a brush stroke, but it feels like a really like staccato, like kind of jagged brush stroke. It's not, like you were saying about like the Preacher example. It's not like a smooth. It is like a kind of like Comic Sandy, kind of like soft. Like the Marvel style, like the house style of Marvel or DC, where it's a bit more. It kind of feels more gentle. I don't know. It's weird to talk about lettering like that, but it does feel a little bit more gentle. Whereas here it feels like everything ends on like a point. Like if you look at like the K's and the E's, they kind of like you could pick one up and stab someone with one of those. and that's it's awesome because all of this is part of the storytelling of it, regardless if you notice it or not. You know, I'm asking you to notice it, but regardless of when you read it, you saw that or not. It's at least it was in your mind, you know, for one of you at least, that this was not necessarily the same as what you've seen in other comics, and so part of that does bleed into the way that the story interacts with you as well. The thing that I always think when I letter books is I'm always trying to find like a font that matches the artwork. So, but specifically the lines of the artwork. So if you look at like a figure, the first page is maybe not the best example of it. If you skip along a little bit, flick through to right at the end of the first issue when they all get together again. Where are we? So yeah, there's a right at the end. There's a right near the end of the first issue. So just before the double spread of the aliens in the World War I place, there's the page where it starts out with the "What is this shit?" Balloon. Mm-hmm. So on that page, if you look at like panel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So look at panel 5, which is the "What is it, Dad? What do you see?" panel. So you can see Grant's face, and there's a texture to the line work that is on his face. And to me, the texture of that line work is really, really similar to the texture of the line work on the letter forms. So there is like a jaggedness, there is a sort of like a thin roughness. I hope this is not like people are just sound like this guy sounds like a crazed madman.
No,
but
I totally see the similarity there between line weight and sort of edge to it, I think.
Yeah. So I mean, you can see it very specifically, I think, on the brow lines here, and on like his eye lines on the right side. There is a jagged penness and a rough-hewn penness, like pen look style to Scalera's art that is being, in my mind, replicated quite nicely by the letter forms. I mean, this is a font from Nate Picos, Blambot, who does letters like a bunch of DC books and stuff like that. Okay. And it's called, I think it's called Euro Comics or something like that. And if you've ever read like a Mobius book, it's kind of quite similar to like Mobius's letter forms, but only if you've read the non-translated versions, I should say, because Mobius was his own letterer, so he would for the most part letter his own work. And he did that with I think it was like a quill pen, and so you get like a sharpness to it, and a kind of like a jagged roughness. And there's a really, really cool video, if you are super nerdy and into lettering like I am, of Mobius lettering, and it's amazing because he does it almost without care. It's like he just kind of quickly moves and he creates the letters, like this is exactly that kind of sense of like rough jaggedness that is shown in like when Mobius does his lettering. It feels like there isn't as much care almost in the letter forms, which again is, I think, very, very intentional. But it just to me just goes to show like the kind of jagged danger of the world. And the other thing that bleeds into that so super specifically, and you can see it on the same page, is how thin and tight the tails are on the balloons. Because some comics you'll have, I think, like the Marvel and DC style is to have a fairly, not super wide, but like a fairly wide tail where it touches the edge of the balloon. Whereas these, again, to use my dangerous metaphor from earlier, you could snap one of these tails off and that would be ripe for stabbing. I don't know why I keep coming back to stabbing people. But there is a pointed jaggedness to it, right? There is like a danger to the tails. And again, it's, it might not be anything that you notice, but it's all there that creates like a pointedness to the world. And there's kind of like a slight danger to everything involved. And most of the sound effects are also kind of similar. If you flick back one page, there's the deep, deep on the buzzer on the top left, and there's that dree noise as well. And it's the same thing. Rarely in this book do you find any chunky sound effects. When I went through earlier, I don't think I remember seeing a single one. So everything is kind of still thin and jagged, even when it needs to be kind of big, like that dree sound effect is there. There is a lack of chunk, to say, in this. And again, like, it seems like wholly intentional to build into that feeling in the overall look of the book. But just so this is just if anyone ever says to you like, do you care about lettering? You can now say no, but someone tried to make me.
No. I think I try and take note of it. I mean, DC and Marvel always have their house style for sort of every part of a book. So I try to take note of it, but I feel like I don't have enough, conscious thought to back up any thoughts with.
I don't think you have to. It's just I don't think anything's really gained from from having that at all. It probably just gets in the way more than anything else. I mean, so one thing I was curious about with like you all there as well is like how much of is there any of you that want to make comics? Is there any of you that like have an interest in like writing comics or drawing comics or being part of the comic making process or?
I definitely always have a couple like plots spinning in my head, but never have taken the step to put them, really formulate a 20-page script out of it or whatever.
No one, yeah, I mean, rarely do people do that. It's crazy to get to that stage in the first place. But so is it like what for all of you, if I can ask you, is like what is it about comics? What's the appeal for comics for all of you, especially for stuff like this, which isn't steeped in stuff you may have been reading for 10, 15 years or whatever, like superhero books. Like, what is the appeal to this kind of comic to you? I'm sorry to keep asking all of you questions, but I'm super curious as to what you love about it as well.
This is definitely escapism.
Escape from reality. I mean, a humdrum life, doing the same thing every day. This is a way out. So.
Yeah.
But like you said before, like comics offer a medium that film or even TV and regular books don't offer, that you can get an amazing and unique story out of it and have these wonderful visuals that, in a book you might be able to piece it together yourself, but like TV, unless it's maybe animated, you're not going to get something as detailed but so simple at the same time. Like, especially like you said that the end of page or end of volume 1, something like that, you might, if it was like a movie or TV show, you're going to hear all those noises and there's going to be a lot of extra background chatter that you don't necessarily need. And with this, you just get straight to the point that this is a war zone. You guys got to soak it in for yourself instead of having it saturated onto you.
I think
that was that's an awesome. I love that's such a good point because that is why comics are, I don't want to say they're better than anything else, right? But that's why comics are. That's why you could easily make the argument that comics are better than anything else, like in terms of a visual medium, because what they do is they force you, and the chap at the back said escapism, but also it's not because it is, but it isn't, but it is because it is, but also it isn't because it forces you to engage with it in a way that like film and TV don't, because you have to essentially fill in the gaps between these images that you're given in sequence. And so just like when you read a novel and you kind of, you have to imagine what characters look like in the novel, you give them the description, but you kind of imagine them yourself. Here, you're somewhere in between that and film where, you go watch a film, you just sit down and someone just shows you stuff at a pace that they decide, at a speed that they dictate and in a way that they want you to watch it, in an order they want you to watch it. And you just sit there and, it just kind of hits you and you experience it and then you leave. And then you go have a nap because it was crazy intense and everyone disappeared at the end. Whereas in comics, you have to build part of that yourself. You have to build the voice yourself of the characters. You have to build the feeling of the world. You have to see and hear the sound effects. You are so much more of an active participant in this story than it may appear to you when you're reading it. There is a lot of work that you are doing yourselves that film and TV don't let you do. Essentially, they take care of that for you. And the main thing is pacing. And we talked, I talked a little bit about it when you talk about like the monthly model versus like trades or whatever. But also, I'm sure you all read this at different speeds. I'm sure each one of you, it may have taken like an hour to read this. Another of you, it may have taken like 6 hours. But you dictated the pace, and I'm sure that some of you is like, have I disappeared? Oh, no, I'm still there. Okay, good.
Yeah,
okay,
we lost you for a second, but You're back.
But some of you, like I was saying, some of you as I did, which is probably you read something and then you went, oh wait a minute, and you flicked back a few pages and you checked, you rechecked a scene or whatever, or it made you think about something else and you went back to check that. And these are all things that you can't do in film and TV that you do in comics that make you an active participant and make you, force you to be part of the storytelling. And that's so cool. It's so cool that also that you're kind of like picking up on that and talking about that and stuff, because that makes me excited as someone that loves that part of of comic storytelling. But also the escapism thing I always find awesome, because the escapism thing feeds into the whole lie of it again, which is this is a story about family drama and a guy cheating on his wife and stuff, which is super not escapism. Like that's like hard reality. That's just people being people. But it's hidden under the guise of a sci-fi escapism. And so even like, and this is in superhero books all the time, right? There's like, politics or deep character studies or whatever in superhero books, but under the guise of like some dude in pants punching bad guys. So all storytelling in some way hides the real value of it into escapism, and that's really, really clever. And I think that's why stuff like this is interesting to talk about, because it is escapism, but also isn't escape. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. You escape from the reality that you're in. You're put into a new one, but then you have your own perspectives of that world with your own issues or mentalities.
Right, yeah. And also that central plot of Grant. Okay, so how many of you liked Grant as a character? The main dude. How many of you thought he was a good guy?
I enjoyed him, but
He seems interesting.
Right. I like reading him, but I don't know if I would buddy up to it.
And how much of that changed from the first issue as it developed? Because in the opening, the first issue, he seems kind of okay. Like he's kind of got like he seems smart. He's got like a good head on his shoulders, at least initially, and he seems to be taking charge of the situation. So did you identify with him initially?
Yeah, I think so. He seems like he's, despite the sort of first text box, it seems like he's successful. He's trying to get his kids home. He cares about the people around him. He's sort of adventurous. And as it goes on, we learn he's a philanderer and a liar and sort of selfish. Yeah, so
I think this
so.
Ties in with like what you were talking about with like the lie kind of too, like especially with Grant, because it's like this big almost sword and sorcery. I'm gonna run through, save this woman, grab this treasure, and get out of here. And then it's like, oh well, you're doing it because you're selfish and you're trying to
got this visions of grandiose success.
Yeah.
That is the lie as well, and the lie is also the way the book presents him to you initially, which is as the hero of the story, and then sort of tells you like, oh well, he is, but also there's this really kind of dark secret that's going to destroy his family. But like, was there a point at which you kind of, do you remember actively kind of feeling like you didn't like him, or you kind of wanted to distance yourself from him?
when he says that his wedding band means nothing, it's just a piece of metal.
Right.
Pretty, yeah.
Brutal.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dark, and but then I suppose the question then becomes, okay, so if he's our hero, but then we find out that he's not our hero. So then, for you reading it, who were you following? Like, who were you rooting for?
I found myself with Kadir.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I felt like Kadir was the one that he was trying to keep everything together, but at the same time, kind of doing it for his own reason and his own purpose. But in the end, he's warranted with trying to get the kids home. It's
Right.
like Grant hated him, sabotaging the whole thing, and knowing everything about it. But at the end, when he's dying, he says, "I'm dead. I'm not coming back. Your problem now. Get my kids home. Get them safe. Get them to Sarah." And that's ultimately where it boiled down to. And I don't know why there was a moment where I just started following him.
But he is essentially presented like as the bad guy, isn't he? For
Because he was the villain from the
yeah, for the most part, he's like the baddie. So it's weird. It's weird that it presents. So because what I remember the book doing is it presents Grant as the good guy, and then it tells you that he's not as good as he may seem. But then it kicks into the narration of the. I'm so bad with people's names, but you know, like the war vet guy, the kind of like the muscle. Yeah, so he comes in and then he's kind of like our hero because he's like, you know, he actually seems like a nice guy. Like he's actually like he's got he's just trying to protect everyone. And he's got like a sad backstory of like his granddad in the war and stuff, and it actually just kind of seems like a nice dude.
Yeah.
And then he gets left to die. And then we're like, oh right, okay, so that we're not going to have any nice people to, you know, like to root for here. But cleverly, they give you like a body to kind of put your faith into, almost like you've been misled, you've been lied to, but okay, this guy's going to be your savior now, and we're going to follow him for, you know, I can't remember if it's like a whole issue or if it's like half an issue.
Yeah, an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, you're kind of stranded again on a desert island where you don't really know anyone else. And so your choices essentially are the supposed good guy or the supposed bad guy. And we talk about it being like a morality thing between like of these family dynamics. It's interesting that what we perceive to be the bad guy ends up being the one that can potentially save the day when the good guy who's also the bad guy dies.
Right.
Somewhere in there is the thing. But it's and that's also, I think, is the fun part about if we talk about like escapism. Okay, it's escaping into this other life as well, but also this other life is just as morally grey and as difficult to navigate and as full of lies and deception as the thing we're trying to escape. It's just it takes place in a colourful world. And so we almost like trick ourselves, and I know that I did when I first read it. You know, you almost trick yourself into just believing that like this might be better. But by the time you find out it's not, I don't know. I'm kind of too far into it now to give up. So like by the time I get to the point where the hero's dead and the bad guy's the hero, I'm kind of like, well, now I need to ride this out because the woman's got a ghost in her, and I need to know what happens next. Right. And it's so the web of deception is so it's spun so tightly that like by that point it's like I'm trapped. Like I'm trapped now. I need to know what happens. And I love that, you know, the evilness of storytelling in that regard. I just think it's so, I don't know. It's horrible, but it's also genius, and it's exciting, but it's also devastating a little bit.
I feel like books are very much, you know, have that sort of theme in general. I think the gray characters and flip-flopping of who's good, who's bad.
Do you think, like, this is one thing, because I haven't read beyond this, because I know obviously there's like a whole bunch more issues beyond this. Has anyone read beyond these 6
I've only read the second trade up, you know, any further than this, yeah.
Okay. Does it, just because I'm super, don't tell me, but what does everyone think about, like, the other dimension Grant? Like, was that a real get out where they were going to have a better life, or was that kind of like some evil, you know, like Mr. Fantastic, like evil versions of himself, kind of from the multiverse sort of thing? Like, what's everyone's take on it? This is not for analysis. This is more just curiosity.
I think it was he did something wrong in his life, and he wanted to go around and make sure that other hims didn't make the mistake that he did, and he wanted to right the wrongs that he made with his decisions.
Totally. I think he believes he can provide a better life, but whether or not he actually can,
I don't know. I thought he was kind of selfish. Here he is coming back to take over the Grant characters' kids to try to give them a better life and to fill the void of his failure. You know, so I don't really know.
Right. That's not that Grant's fault.
Yeah, exactly. It's his fault his kids died, but I'm going to go take this Grant's kids just to fill the void that I screwed up. Yeah. So
it's also with the multiverse stuff or whatever you call it. They have a name for it, right? Is it the something? I don't know. I can't remember.
With the onion.
The onion, right? So it's like the thing with like other versions of these people is how many like Grant's kids has this Grant like tried to take? Because it can't, like, if we're gonna accept there's like a multiple, like an infinite version of all of these versions of themselves, like how many times has Scar Grant gone, you know, like to steal non-Scar Grant's kids.
He even has the patches of the Onion as like ear necklaces of like sort of killed or whatever. So presumably a bunch.
He's gone through it. That was my fear. Like I kind of was. A part of me was like, he could just imagine if he just takes the kids and that's the story. Like it just sort of just ends there 4 issues in. But yeah, no, there's something like dangerously clever about his. I'm glad that you mentioned the onions thing because he's something dangerously clever about his outfit. If I'm going to desperately try and find it.
He's a great intro.
Where are we?
It's issue 5.
Issue 5. Yeah.
End of issue 4.
Oh, is he just? Yeah, he just zaps a.
You get that landscape at the end of issue 4. With a couple.
I think it's issue 4. Yeah, I think it's 4. There's the everything's okay. I'm here to get you home line. I'm looking at Comixology, so the page count's a bit different. I'm trying to think. What's it in there? Nothing that stands out. There's a black page with just Pia, and then it's like a handful of pages after that.
Like this one?
No. Is it before that? After that? It's the page where he gazettes the dude, and he's got the "Everything's okay, I'm here to get you home" panel.
Yep.
Yeah, inside.
Yeah, it's in 5.
Okay, in 5.
Yeah, it's sort of
6 or 7 pages in.
Yep.
Yeah, because so his design is not a design of a good guy, which is also kind of interesting. And I don't know if it ends up being a double bluff or not. But there is a weird thing. There was a study. I can't remember which university did it, but there was a study about the way we interact with people's faces on like it was in film and TV. I think maybe it was just film, but it was film and TV. And what happens is when you get presented a new image, typically your brain tries to find the person in that picture. So typically what if I gave you like a big wide vista or whatever, but there was just like a dude's face in there, you would go and find that face, like naturally, instinctively you go and look for the thing that looks like you. So I'm always like wary when a character's introduced that doesn't show their face. Right, yeah, because everyone else, you can see their face. And like this is a page where you can see everyone's face, and they walk around without the thing on, because you can empathize with them a little bit more because you can just see the person. So whenever someone turns up without a face, right, then it's like, okay, so what is this person hiding? Because it's all like deceptive body language and all deceptive visuals, and yet they frame him in that everything's okay to get you home panel in like a low angle, which is also like a super heroic. Like if you imagine Superman, you're not looking down at him most of the time. He's kind of towering above. Yeah. So it's playing with like visual language in a way that's weirdly interesting, because he doesn't to me look like a good guy, but he's being presented as a good guy. And there's that again. It's that kind of like deception of like, okay, so I don't know how to take him yet. And I think that's why I asked you the question as well. With like, what does everyone think about him? Because it's hard to get a read when he looks like the bad guy, right? Because he's scarred up, and the classic one is Scar from The Lion King. People with scars on their faces are bad guys. I can say that as a guy who's got like a bunch of scars on his face. It's okay. If anyone else got scars, I'm not saying you're a bad guy. But in fiction, scars on face typically tends to lean into a darker or a grittier, because they're not he's just not as handsome. And again, I'm saying that as a man who's got scars on his face. But sorry, go on.
I was just going to make note of, it's sort of funny that he's introduced after we have this character flip for our Grant. Then this new Grant is introduced, and now we don't know how to feel about this guy because we don't know how to feel about our own Grant, I guess.
Yeah. Because we accept there's some kind of deception relating to him already.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's awesome. But he has got he's got like the 6 badges on his chest, but it's also hard to tell, because I couldn't remember reading it, going through it, if they were. Oh yeah, no, they are. Okay, yeah, there you go. That makes more sense. So you can see if you look at the page afterwards, because on that page it almost looks like they might just be part of his costume. But if you look at the page afterwards, they are all linked together as kind of like a necklace.
Yeah. They sort of flop around and stuff.
Yeah. So, oh yeah, no, he's a bad guy, isn't he? Yeah.
I think probably.
Yeah, I think he's fully a bad guy. It's clever because they don't actually draw attention to it. There's not a close up of his badges that says like these are clearly things he's scalped off of other travelers, but it's there for you to see it, I guess, as we've now all just found out. Did anyone notice that already? Or is that just me that's had a revelation?
I noticed the patches today while I was rereading this, yeah, and definitely seems like he has some conquests, copies from past dimensionons.
And this is like also the other really really cool thing that comics can do that I think you struggle to do in other things. If you think about prose, right? If you wanted to explain that this guy had this like necklace of 6 different onion logos in prose, you kind of have to just tell me that he's got a necklace of 6 different onion things. Sure. Whereas in comics, you can do what they're doing here, which is you can show it to me, but without really showing it to me. Like you're not it's not an inset panel. It's not a close up. It's just in the scene happening. But the beautiful thing about it compared to film is, on film, when I'm watching, if I'm in a cinema, I can't just pause and rewind if I saw a thing. Like if I saw him move and it flopped, I can't just like stick my hand up and ask this to roll it back like 10 seconds so I can double check if that's what I saw. But on comics, everything exists forever, always, and so you can just go back and like we're doing now and just flick back and go like, oh yeah, for sure that dude's a bad guy. That dude's for sure a bad guy. So I think you can actually end up being a little bit subtler. About it, and it might be that a case of like, maybe theoretically in issue 13 you find out he is a bad guy and you find out that he killed 5 other people or whatever, and then this still exists for you to flick back to and be like, oh my god, they told me that from the very get-go, from his very first entrance, that this was a bad guy. Oh, I can't believe I didn't see that before, man. Oh, that's so annoying. Well, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's a great.
I'm so glad that you noticed that. I'm so glad that you noticed like that he had the badges and everything like that as well. That's so cool.
I got you, man. It's too silly for me to say that to you.
Yeah. No, I love this. I love this stuff. This is why it's so much fun talking through stuff, because there's always something that everyone misses, and that I've so obviously missed that. I love that so much.
Well, I don't want to keep you all night, man, but we're going to talk about this some more. Thanks so much for joining us. This is really cool. I wish we could have you every meeting, but that'll be hard to but yeah, that was great. I think I'm going to try and take this into future comic club meetings, and
we'll ask him back.
Yeah, we'll ask you back. Hopefully, maybe you can join us again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. I hope it was I hope it was interesting. I hope. Okay. Okay. Good.
Well, where can we find you, man?
You can find me on Twitter at HassanOE. You can find me on YouTube if you just search Strip Panel Naked. I'm pretty sure I'm the only thing that's that. Or if you want to read the magazine, which we have been Eisner nominated this year, we found out recently. You can get that at panelxpanel.com. And if this has been at all interesting to you, then any of those things I think you'll find kind of interesting as well.
Cool. Thanks so much for joining us, man. Yeah, have a good night, and hopefully we'll have you back sometime.
Yeah, and you guys, enjoy the rest of it. I'll catch you soon.
Take it easy, man.
Bye-bye.